I thought I had the perfect marriage, 20 years with Sarah, and we had it all. A beautiful home, 2 kids who made us proud, a life that looked great from the outside. But when everything came crashing down, I realized how wrong I was. It wasn't a big fight or some sudden revelation. It was a small, almost insignificant thing that made me stop and really think. One night, I was going through our shared computer, trying to look up some vacation ideas. As I sat there scrolling, Sarah's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She was in the next room, so I thought I'd just check if it was important, something about the kids or a work message. I didn't mean to snoop, but when I saw the name Mike pop up on the screen, I hesitated. I'd never heard of this guy. It wasn't a random text. It was from someone she clearly knew well. The message was simple. "Can't wait to see you tonight." I froze. I knew it wasn't some innocuous text. The tone, the way it was written, it felt different. I should have closed the phone, walked away, and let it go. But I didn't. My hands were shaking, but I couldn't stop myself. I dug deeper. There were more messages, more flirtation, more promises of meeting up. It hit me like a freight train. Sarah, the woman I'd been married to for 2 decades, was talking to someone else. And not just anyone, someone she had feelings for. I couldn't believe it. I thought I was doing everything right. I loved her, supported her, took care of everything, made sure the house was in order, the kids were happy. But now, all that effort felt meaningless. What was I missing? Why wasn't it enough for her? Was it me? Was it just a phase she was going through, or had I become that guy? The one who's so caught up in the grind of life that he loses sight of the things that matter. The next few days were torture. I didn't confront her right away. I couldn't. I didn't know what I'd say or how to even bring it up, but it gnawed at me every minute. The guilt, the anger, the confusion. I wanted to ignore it, to believe it was nothing, that it was just some harmless flirting, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I wasn't dumb. This was real. I started to watch her more closely. I'd glance over at her while she was on her phone waiting for her to slip up. But Sarah's smart. She knew how to hide things. Her smiles became more strained, her conversations shorter. And every time she looked at me, I saw something in her eyes, something I hadn't noticed before. It wasn't the love I'd been used to seeing. It was more like resignation. She wasn't happy, not with me, not with us. It took me a week to finally say something. The moment felt like the breaking point, but I had to do it. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. "Sarah," I said, my voice low, almost foreign to me. "We need to talk." She looked up from the book she was reading, her face blank. "About what?" "About Mike," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I saw the messages. For a second, there was nothing. She didn't say a word. She didn't even blink. She just stared at me, almost like she was waiting for me to break the silence. And that's when I realized our marriage, the one I thought was perfect, had already ended. I just hadn't seen it coming. The silence between us felt like it could stretch on forever. Sarah didn't say anything, didn't even blink. She just stared at me like she was trying to figure out how to respond to a question she knew was coming, but wasn't ready to face. In that moment, I felt like I had lost all control of the situation. I'd seen the signs, something had been off for weeks, but seeing it laid out in front of me in black and white on her phone was different. It was real now. Too real. I waited, my heart pounding in my chest, hoping she would speak, hoping she would say something to explain this. I needed an explanation, something to make it all make sense, something to make it okay. But instead, she just sighed, a long, deep exhale that seemed to carry the weight of years of hidden emotions. Finally, she looked at me, and I could see the guilt in her eyes. "It's not what you think," she said quietly, but there was no conviction in her voice. It wasn't the kind of reassurance I needed. She didn't sound like she was trying to fix this. She didn't sound like she was even trying to make me feel better. It was like she was trying to convince herself more than she was convincing me. I stood up abruptly, pacing the room. My mind was racing, but I couldn't put the words together. How had we gotten here? How had we arrived at this point where everything I thought we had was now a lie? The love I thought was rock solid, unshakable, had been slowly crumbling beneath my feet without me even knowing it. She was talking to someone else, someone who made her feel something I no longer could. "You're kidding, right?" I finally snapped, my voice rising without meaning to. This guy, Mike, he's who you're talking to, and you didn't think I'd notice? You didn't think I'd feel it?" My hands were shaking as I gripped the edge of the counter, trying to hold myself together. "Sarah, we've been married for 20 years. 20 years. And this is what we've come to?" She didn't respond at first. I could see the tears welling up in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Instead, she wiped them away, as if trying to hold back the reality of the situation. But the truth was, the tears didn't matter anymore. They didn't change the fact that the trust between us had been shattered. The foundation of our marriage cracked wide open. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said softly, her voice breaking slightly. "It just did. I don't know what happened to us, Mark. I don't know when it all started to fall apart." I felt like the floor had just dropped out from under me. "You don't know," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "We've been living in the same house for years, Sarah. How can you not know? How can you not see that we've been drifting apart? I've been here trying to keep everything together, trying to make this work, and you've been—" I couldn't finish the sentence. It was too painful to even say it out loud. "You've been talking to him, haven't you?" She nodded, the tears finally falling. "I never meant to hurt you, but Mark, I've been so lonely. I didn't feel seen anymore. I didn't feel like you wanted me the way I wanted to be wanted." That hit me harder than anything she could have said. Loneliness. She felt alone in a marriage of 20 years. I thought I was doing everything right, being there for her, supporting her, being the guy who provided, who took care of everything. But apparently, that wasn't enough. And the worst part? I had no idea. I didn't see it coming. I didn't see her slipping away until she was already out the door, emotionally speaking. "And Mike," I asked, my voice now cold and distant, trying to hold back the rage that was bubbling just beneath the surface. "What does he give you that I don't? What's so special about him? Is it the attention, the excitement? What?" She took a shaky breath, her eyes dropping to the floor. "He listens to me. He actually listens. He makes me feel desirable. He makes me feel like I'm still worth something." Her voice cracked, and she sniffled as she wiped away more tears. "I've felt invisible for so long, Mark, and when Mike came along, he made me feel alive again. He made me feel like I wasn't just someone's wife, someone's mother. I felt like me again." I stood there, stunned. It felt like she had just told me she didn't know who I was anymore. She didn't see me. She didn't see what I was doing, the sacrifices I was making to keep things together. I wasn't perfect, but I loved her. I loved her more than anything in this world. But somewhere along the way, I had lost her, and now I was watching her slip further away. "I never meant to fall for him," she added, almost pleading with me. I didn't know how to fix what was broken between us." I couldn't take it anymore. The anger that had been building up inside me exploded. "Fix it," I shouted. "You think this is something you can just fix with a few more I'm sorries? Do you think I can just sit here and pretend this is okay?" I took a step back, my hands balling into fists. "You've been sleeping with him, haven't you?" She winced, but didn't answer. The silence said everything. The truth was clear, and it was a truth I wasn't ready to hear, but couldn't avoid any longer. My stomach twisted in knots, and my heart felt like it was being ripped from my chest. I couldn't process it all at once. The emotions, hurt, betrayal, anger, confusion, were all tangled up inside me. I didn't know where to go from here. I didn't know if I could forgive her. I didn't know if I could even look at her the same way again. All I knew was that my world had just been shattered. Everything I had believed in, everything I thought we were, had come crashing down. And now I had to figure out what the hell to do next. The truth hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating. I had been holding on to the idea of what we were for so long, and now it felt like I was drowning in a lie I didn't want to see. The anger I felt wasn't just about what Sarah had done, it was about everything we had lost without either of us noticing. The love, the passion, the connection. We had let it slip away, little by little, until there was nothing left but this mess of hurt and betrayal. I stood there, looking at her, and for the first time in years, I didn't recognize her. She wasn't the woman I'd married. She wasn't the woman who used to laugh at my stupid jokes, who would surprise me with a cup of coffee just because. She wasn't the woman who made me feel like I was enough, like I was wanted. She was someone else now, someone who had drifted away while I was too busy to see it. And what killed me the most? The fact that I didn't see it coming. I had been so focused on everything I thought was important, providing for the family, making sure everything was running smoothly, that I ignored the cracks in our relationship. I ignored the little things that didn't feel right, the tension that had started to build between us. I had taken it all for granted, assuming that just because we had been together for so long, we would always be fine. "Do you even love me anymore, Sarah?" The words came out before I could stop them, and as soon as they left my mouth, I regretted it. But it was too late. They hung there, unanswered. Her face softened, and for a moment, I thought maybe she would finally say something that would make this all hurt a little less. But she didn't. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know if I do anymore." I felt my world shift, like the ground beneath me was suddenly unstable. How had we gotten here? How had I missed all the signs? I wanted to scream, to throw something, to do anything to release the pressure that was building in my chest. But instead, I just stood there, frozen, trying to process what she had just said. "I never meant for any of this to happen," Sarah continued, her voice barely audible. "It's just... I got lost, Mark. Somewhere along the way, I got lost. And when Mike came into the picture, he made me feel seen again. He made me feel like I mattered. I didn't know how to handle it." I shook my head, frustration bubbling to the surface. "So that's it? You're just going to throw away everything we had because you felt lost? That's your excuse?" Sarah flinched at my words, but I couldn't stop myself. I was angry. So angry at her, at myself, at everything. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know if I even wanted to anymore. "I never wanted to hurt you," she said quietly, her eyes welling up with tears again. "I didn't think it would go this far, but I can't change what's been done. I can't take it back, and I don't know how to fix it." I laughed bitterly, the sound echoing in the silence between us. "You don't know how to fix it?" I repeated, disbelief in my voice. "What do you expect me to do? Pretend it never happened? Pretend everything's fine? We can't just sweep this under the rug, Sarah. We're not kids anymore." Her eyes filled with tears as she wiped at her face, but I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. "I don't expect you to pretend, but I need you to understand that I'm not the same person I was when we first met. I've changed, and I can't be who you want me to be anymore." I felt a wave of anger and sadness wash over me, and for a moment I wanted to run. I wanted to leave and never come back, but I couldn't. This was my life, my marriage. The woman I thought I knew, and no matter how much it hurt, I had to face it. "Maybe we've both changed, then," I said, my voice tight. "Maybe we've both been so wrapped up in our own lives that we forgot about each other. Maybe we're just not the people we used to be." She didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. We had said it all, and now all that was left was the mess we had created, the trust that had been broken, the love that had been lost. I stood there, in the middle of our living room, staring at the woman I had spent half my life with, and I realized something. I didn't know if I could forgive her. I didn't know if I could look past the betrayal, but I also didn't know how to move forward. The idea of walking away felt like giving up, like letting go of something that had been so important to me. But I also didn't want to spend the rest of my life trying to hold on to something that wasn't there anymore. "I need space," I said finally, the words feeling like they came from someone else. "I need time to figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do now." Sarah nodded silently, her eyes full of regret. I didn't know if it was too late for us. I didn't know if we could ever go back to what we were, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't stay in this limbo forever. I had to find a way out of this, for myself. I walked out of the room, leaving Sarah behind. I didn't know what the next step would be, but I couldn't keep living in the past. I had to move forward, even if I didn't know where that would take me. The next few days felt like I was walking through a fog. Everything was unclear. I couldn't focus on work, couldn't focus on anything. It was like my life was split into two parts, before Sarah's confession and after. In the before, I had been a guy who had it all together. In the after, I was someone who didn't even recognize himself anymore. I didn't know how I got here. I didn't know how to get out of this mess. For the first time in years, I found myself questioning everything. My marriage, my decisions, my whole life. I thought I had everything figured out, but I couldn't even trust my own instincts anymore. I kept replaying everything Sarah had said. She didn't know how to fix it. She didn't know how we got here. She didn't know anything anymore. That was the turning point for me. I couldn't keep walking around like a zombie, pretending everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. I had to do something about it. But what? What the hell could I do to fix this? Could I fix this? I kept asking myself if it was even worth it. I sat on the couch, staring at the blank screen of the TV. The kids were at a sleepover, and Sarah was out running errands. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. I hated it. It used to be full of life. It used to be a place where I felt at home. Now, it felt like a cage. I ran my fingers through my hair and took a deep breath. I had two choices, I realized. I could wallow in self-pity, letting the anger and sadness consume me. Or I could take control. And I wasn't the type of guy to sit around and let life kick me in the teeth. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait around for Sarah to figure out what she wanted. I wasn't going to wait for her to find herself or figure things out. I needed to figure myself out first. I took a week off work. I needed a break, a real break, not the kind where you stay home and drown in your thoughts, but a real break where I could clear my head and make some decisions. I'd been so focused on Sarah, on our marriage, that I'd lost sight of myself. I had no idea who I was anymore. I wasn't just the guy married to Sarah, I was Mark. I needed to get back to who I was, and maybe figure out if that guy was even still in there. I went out and signed up for a Krav Maga class. It wasn't because I thought I needed to defend myself, though that might have been a good idea, but because I needed something to focus on, something physical, something that would push me past all the emotions I was drowning in. I needed to feel strong again, to feel in control of my life. The first class was brutal. I couldn't remember the last time I pushed my body that hard. My muscles burned, my chest felt like it was going to explode, and sweat dripped down my face. But in that moment, I felt alive. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about Sarah or Mike or our messed up marriage. I was thinking about how to make it through the next round, how to focus on the next movement. It was exactly what I needed. I left the class feeling like I had something I could hold on to. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was a start. The next day, I went to a dealership and bought a Harley Davidson. I'd always wanted one, but Sarah always said no. She thought it was too dangerous. She thought it was too reckless. But I was tired of playing by the rules. I was tired of being the safe guy, so I bought the bike. And let me tell you, when I drove that thing off the lot, it felt like freedom. Real freedom. The wind in my face, the open road ahead of me, and the hum of the engine beneath me. It wasn't just about the bike. It was about me finally doing something for myself. Something that made me feel alive. When I got home that evening, Sarah was already back. She didn't say anything at first when she saw the bike parked in the driveway, but I could see the surprise in her eyes. I didn't care. I didn't care if she liked it or not. I was doing something for me. For the first time in forever, I wasn't worried about what anyone else thought. I wasn't worried about making Sarah happy or keeping up appearances. I was doing something that made me feel good. Sarah stood there, her arms crossed, her face a mix of disbelief and concern. "What the hell, Mark?" she asked. "A motorcycle? Seriously? I thought we talked about this." I smiled, and for the first time in a long time, it felt real. Yeah, we did, I said, but I'm done playing it safe. I'm done doing things the way everyone else wants me to. This is for me, Sarah, not for you, not for the kids, just for me. She didn't respond right away. I could see the hurt in her eyes. I could see that she was struggling with the changes she was seeing in me. But honestly, I didn't care. I couldn't care anymore. I had to do this for me. I had to find myself again. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I spent more time working on my business, started meeting new people, and kept up with my Krav Maga classes. Slowly but surely, I started to feel like I was getting my life back on track. I was no longer defined by Sarah's approval or our failed marriage. I was Mark again, the guy who could stand on his own 2 feet and make decisions for himself. I didn't know what was going to happen with Sarah. I didn't know if we'd ever get back to what we once were, or if we even should. But for the first time in a long time, I felt in control. And that was the most powerful feeling I had in years. It wasn't that I wanted to ignore Sarah, or that I didn't care about what had happened. I did. I was torn apart by the lies, the betrayal, everything. But as the weeks passed, I realized something that shocked me. I was still alive. I wasn't dead inside like I thought I might be. And in some strange way, the chaos that had consumed my life had forced me to look at the world in a new light. I wasn't waiting for things to get better. I was doing something about it. And that was the difference. Sarah had noticed. She could see the changes in me, probably before I even fully understood them, but she didn't know what to do with them. Hell, neither did I. It wasn't like I had it all figured out. There were days when the weight of what happened between us hit me like a ton of bricks. There were moments when I'd wake up in the middle of the night, a deep ache in my chest as I thought about everything that we had lost. I wanted to hate her for what she did. I wanted to be angry and cold, to turn my back on her completely, but I couldn't. That was the hardest part. The anger had faded, replaced by a quiet sort of resignation. I didn't feel like I could keep pretending that we were okay, that everything could just go back to the way it was. There was no going back. The person I had been, the man who thought everything would work out, who believed in the happy endings, wasn't who I was anymore. And Sarah wasn't the woman I thought I knew either. She had changed. And so had I. We were sitting in the kitchen one evening. The kids were at their grandparents' house for the weekend, and the silence between us was thick. I had been trying to avoid this conversation for a while now, but I knew I couldn't run from it any longer. It wasn't fair to either of us. I had to figure out what the next step was, but I didn't know how. "Mark," Sarah finally said, her voice quiet but steady. "I don't know where we go from here. I don't know how to fix this. I don't even know if it can be fixed." Her words stung, but there was something different about the way she said them. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It wasn't a desperate attempt to hold on to something that was slipping through her fingers. It was acceptance. Acceptance of what had happened. Acceptance of the reality of our situation. I didn't know if it made me feel better or worse. "I don't know if it can be fixed either," I said, meeting her gaze. "But we can't keep pretending that we're fine when we're not. We can't go back to the way things were. We both know that." She nodded, her face a mix of regret and understanding. "I know, but I don't know how to move forward. I don't know what I'm supposed to do." "I'm not sure I know either," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "But I'm trying to figure it out. For the first time in a long time, I'm trying to figure out what's best for me. I can't keep living in the past, Sarah, and neither can you." There was a long pause. I could see her trying to process my words, trying to figure out what they meant. But she didn't say anything for a while. I could tell she was struggling to find the right words. The truth was, we were both struggling. We had no idea what our future looked like. There was no guidebook for this, no easy answer. "Do you think we're done?" she asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated. That word, done, was loaded. It carried so much weight, and honestly, I wasn't sure if we were done. But I couldn't just stay in this limbo anymore. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. I had changed, and so had she, and maybe that meant we couldn't go back. Maybe it meant we weren't meant to be together anymore. "I don't know, Sarah," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I can't say we're done, but I also can't say we're okay. We need time. We both need time to figure out who we are now, separate from each other, because I don't think we can keep living like this." Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. She just nodded, like she had already accepted what I was saying, even though it hurt. I could see it in her face. She knew it just as much as I did. Things had changed, and they couldn't go back to the way they were. But that didn't mean the end of everything. It just meant the beginning of something new. "I'm sorry, Mark," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know how to fix what was broken. And I'm not sure if I ever can." I took a deep breath. "I know. And I'm sorry too. I'm sorry I didn't see the signs sooner. I'm sorry I took us for granted." There was nothing more to say after that. We had said everything that needed to be said. We both understood where we stood now, and though it was painful, it was also freeing. The weight of all the uncertainty, all the confusion, lifted just a little. We weren't perfect. We didn't have all the answers. But at least we were honest with each other for the first time in a long time. I stood up and walked over to her, and for the first time in weeks, I reached out and touched her arm. It wasn't about trying to fix anything. It wasn't about rekindling a lost love. It was just about offering some kind of comfort, some kind of understanding. We had both been through hell, and we didn't know where we were going, but at least we weren't pretending anymore. "We'll figure it out," I said softly. "Whatever happens next, we'll figure it out. But not today." She nodded, and for the first time in a long time, there was a sense of peace between us. It wasn't the kind of peace I had hoped for, but it was a start. The weeks after that conversation felt like a slow burn. Sarah and I had settled into a new routine. It wasn't a happy one, but it was necessary. We lived in the same house, coexisted under the same roof, but it was clear that we were living separate lives. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was only about the kids or logistical things. I didn't know where things were headed, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep going like this. The silence, the distance, it was killing me. I thought about everything that had happened, about what I needed. I had been so focused on trying to fix my marriage that I forgot something important. I needed to fix myself first. I needed to remember who I was before I was a husband, before I was a father. I needed to find my own strength again. One afternoon, a few weeks after that heavy conversation with Sarah, I decided to take a ride on my Harley. The bike had become my escape. It was the one thing that made me feel like I was truly living, not just surviving. The road was my therapy, my freedom. I didn't know where I was going, and honestly, I didn't care. I just needed to get out. I drove for hours, no destination in mind, just letting the wind hit my face, the engine's roar filling my ears. It was during that ride, as I turned onto a quiet stretch of road surrounded by mountains, that it hit me. I had been so focused on the past, on Sarah, on what went wrong, that I hadn't even stopped to think about what I wanted for myself. I had been so caught up in trying to salvage something that maybe was beyond saving. As I pulled over and shut off the engine, I sat there for a while just looking out at the view. The mountains were breathtaking. They seemed so strong, so stable. And for the first time in a long time, I felt small, in a good way. I realized that my world didn't have to be defined by Sarah, by our marriage, or by the mistakes I had made. My world could be mine again. I could be Mark, without the baggage, without the guilt. I could start fresh, no matter how much it hurt. I spent the next few days thinking about it, processing what I needed to do. I realized that I had to stop waiting for Sarah to decide what our future would be. I couldn't put my life on hold for her anymore. I had to take control of my own destiny. I had to figure out what I wanted, what I needed, not just for her, but for me. That's when I made a decision. It wasn't an easy one, but it was the only way forward. I had been holding on to the idea of us for so long, but I couldn't keep holding on to something that wasn't working. I had to let go. I had to tell Sarah that I couldn't stay in a marriage where we were both just going through the motions, pretending everything was okay when it wasn't. When I came home that evening, Sarah was sitting in the kitchen, drinking a cup of tea. She looked up when I walked in, and I could see the exhaustion in her eyes. We had been through so much, and neither of us had come out of it unscathed. "Hey," I said quietly, standing in the doorway. "Can we talk?" She put down her cup and looked at me, a mix of hope and fear in her eyes. She knew, just like I did, that there was more to say, but this time there wasn't any hesitation. I was done waiting. "I've been thinking a lot lately," I started, walking over and sitting across from her, "about everything, about us. And I realized something. We've been holding on to something that's already gone. I've been holding on to this idea of what our marriage was supposed to be, but it's not that anymore. It hasn't been for a while." Sarah's face fell, and I saw the tears start to well up again, but this time I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I just felt sad. I felt like we had both tried our best, but sometimes the best you can do just isn't enough. "I'm not saying this because I want to hurt you," I continued, my voice steady but calm. "But I think it's time for us to move on. Not just from each other, but from this version of ourselves that we've been clinging to. I don't want to live in this limbo anymore, Sarah. And I don't think you do either." She wiped her eyes, but she didn't say anything at first. I could tell she was processing it, trying to figure out how to respond. And then, after a long silence, she nodded. "I know," she said softly. "I've been thinking the same thing. I think we've both been holding on to something that doesn't exist anymore, and maybe it's time for us to accept that." It was like a weight lifted off my chest. I had been so afraid of this moment, afraid of the finality of it, but now that it was here, I realized that it was the only way forward. There was no magic fix for what had happened, no way to undo the damage, but we could start a new chapter, even if it meant doing it apart. "I don't want us to hate each other, Sarah," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I don't want us to look back and regret what we had, but I think we need to move on." She nodded again, her lips trembling. "I don't hate you, Mark. I don't know how we got here, but I do know that I can't keep pretending." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were both on the same page. We didn't have all the answers. We didn't know where we'd go from here, but we both knew that pretending we were okay wasn't going to get us anywhere. The next few days were filled with difficult conversations, practical decisions, who would keep the house, who would take the kids to school, what our future would look like. But even though it was hard, there was a sense of relief. We weren't trying to fix the impossible anymore. We weren't forcing something that wasn't working, and that was the first step toward healing. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I was moving forward. Not for Sarah, not for anyone else, but for me, and that was enough. A month passed after that conversation. Sarah and I had come to an agreement, a quiet truce of sorts. We were no longer living in the same emotional space, but we weren't at war either. The divorce papers were in motion, and for the first time in a long time, there was a calm between us. It wasn't the kind of calm that meant everything was perfect. It was the kind of calm that came from acceptance. From knowing that the battle was over, even if it didn't feel like a victory. In the midst of it all, I was learning to breathe again. I was learning to be Mark without the weight of a failed marriage hanging over my head. I didn't have all the answers. Hell, I wasn't even sure where I was going next. But I knew one thing. I was moving forward, one day at a time. And that was enough for me. The hardest part, though, was figuring out what my life would look like without Sarah. We'd been together since we were both kids, in a way. We had built a life together, raised a family together, and now it was just me. I didn't know what that looked like, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could find out. I threw myself into my work. I started taking on new projects that I'd put off for years because I was too busy playing the role of the perfect husband. I began meeting new people, going out with friends, trying things I hadn't done in forever. I bought a small cabin in the mountains, a place where I could escape and just be by myself. The isolation was healing, the fresh air, the quiet, the space. I needed it all. It was a place to think, a place to rebuild. Every now and then, I would think about Sarah. I'd remember the good times, the times when we were happy, before everything started to unravel. I'd think about our kids and what their lives would look like now. But even then, I wasn't consumed by it. I wasn't stuck in the past anymore. The pain wasn't as raw as it had been. And slowly, I began to realize something important. The end of my marriage wasn't the end of me. I wasn't defined by Sarah or our relationship. I was Mark, and I could rebuild, just like I always had. One evening, as I sat on the porch of my cabin, watching the sunset over the mountains, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. There were no more questions of what if, or could we have made it work. The chapter with Sarah had closed, and it wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I had given everything I had to that relationship, but it had taken more than I could afford to give. Now, it was my turn to take care of myself. The phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, half expecting it to be Sarah. But it wasn't. It was a text from an old friend, someone I hadn't heard from in years. A simple message. "Hey, thinking of you. Let's grab a drink sometime." I smiled, feeling a small spark of excitement. It wasn't much, but it was something. Something that didn't involve the past. Something that wasn't weighed down by memories. I had a future again, and maybe, just maybe, it was time to start living it. I sent back a quick response. "Sounds good. Let's do it." For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving in the right direction. The pain wasn't gone, but it wasn't the only thing I was carrying anymore. I had learned to let go of the things I couldn't control, to stop holding on to the past and the people who weren't meant to be in my future. I didn't know what was next, but for the first time, I was okay with that. Because I was going to be okay. I had found myself again. And that was all I needed to start over. The sun dipped below the horizon, and I leaned back in my chair, taking in the quiet, the peace, and the freedom. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and that was enough.